She called me a whale, and Dad said nothing. I stopped eating, erased myself, just for one smile. Then I found out her pregnancy was fake, and at her own party. I exposed everything. That evening wasn't supposed to be different from any other. But if someone had looked closely into the girl's eyes, they might have seen it. Something had quietly cracked. Just like every Friday in that small two-story home in Brooklyn, Jack stood in the kitchen, calmly holding the saucepan. The air was filled with the soft aroma of garlic, butter, and thyme. He was making the same comfort dinner he always made for Alice after every exam, every bad day, and every tear: grilled chicken with garlic mash. Alice was sitting on the kitchen counter, knees folded up. Her hair was loose, light brown with darker tips that always showed up by summer when the sun insisted she spend more time outside. Her eyes were on her book, but her ears were tuned in to her dad's voice. Jack, a partner at a small architecture firm, always left work early on Fridays to show her. "I still show up for you." When Jack told her he'd been seeing someone, casually, just a few coffee dates and dinners, Alice didn't say much, just smiled. Her mom had passed 9 years ago, and if there was anyone in the world who deserved a little happiness, it was Jack. Alice knew her dad hadn't even considered dating until she herself was a high school junior. He'd never let another shadow into their home before. "Catherine," he had told her one evening. "She's kind, thoughtful, and she listens. Not like a therapist listens, but like she actually hears you." Alice nodded. Cool. Their first meeting was planned for a Sunday afternoon. Backyard burgers and lemonade. Catherine showed up in a white blouse, light blue jeans, and her hair loosely tied back. She seemed calm, no forced smiles. She shook Alice's hand and said, "So, you're Alice. Heard a lot about your art skills. I was hoping you'd draw something for our living room someday." Alice smiled politely. "Maybe." Jack's face relaxed just a little. And then, just as Jack went inside to use the bathroom, something happened. Something small, but it left a quiet crack inside Alice. Catherine gently nodded toward her plate. "French fries and a double patty? I used to eat like that too, but metabolism doesn't stay kind forever." Alice paused, thinking she'd misheard. But no. Catherine calmly picked up a few fries from her plate and set them on a napkin. "Try the salad. It's good for girls your age." Her tone wasn't mean. It was soft, like a school counselor. But the words, they were shouting from another room. Alice said nothing, didn't even smile, just looked down. And when her dad came back, Catherine went back to being open, warm, all smiles. That night after dinner, Alice shut the door to her room and looked in the mirror. There was something new on her face. No wound, no obvious sadness, just a quiet question she'd never thought before. "Is there something wrong with me?" Jack knocked gently. "You okay, Peanut?" "Yeah," Alice replied, "just tired." "She's sweet, right?" Jack asked. Alice waited a second before answering. "Yeah, she seems nice." And it wasn't a lie. Catherine did seem nice. But something in her words had already planted a quiet poison inside Alice. Not the kind that kills metabolism, but the kind that eats away at your self-worth. In the weeks that followed, Catherine came over more often, sometimes to bring lunch, other times for dinner with Jack. Her smile was always the same. But Alice started feeling like that smile was just for her dad, never for her. Once, when Jack stepped outside to take a call, Catherine casually asked, "So, boys at your school into girls who eat fries all day, or—" Alice's throat went dry. She didn't respond, and she never told Jack. Because whenever Catherine left, Jack's eyes had a sparkle she hadn't seen since her mom died. And that sparkle, Alice couldn't take that away from him. As the weeks went on, Catherine's little jabs started showing up as advice. "Don't wear horizontal stripes, they make you look wider." Or, "You should try water fasting. It helps teens glow." Whenever Jack was nearby, Catherine was slicing onions or watering flowers, the image of a perfect homemaker. Alice started avoiding food. Her lunchbox would come back untouched. She'd stand in front of the fridge and just drink water. She told herself, maybe this is concern. Maybe Catherine does care, just in a different way. But every night, as she looked in the mirror and saw her collarbones becoming more defined, she grew afraid. Afraid that she was slowly disappearing, and no one seemed to notice. Not even her dad. The Miami summer didn't just leave sunburn on her skin. It left behind a layer of shame that couldn't be washed off in the ocean or faded by time. Jack had planned the Miami trip as a bonding vacation. He wanted Alice and Catherine to get to know each other better. He booked the flights, chose a hotel right by the water, even made reservations at a beachside resort for dinner. Alice said nothing. She told herself, if Dad's happy, I'll learn to smile. That would be her sacrifice. On the very first day at the beach, Alice wore her favorite blue swimsuit, the one her mom had once bought her. It carried memories of happiness, of warmth, and of feeling confident in her own skin. But the moment she stepped out, towel thrown behind her shoulders, Catherine's eyes immediately went to her stomach. And she said quietly, "Didn't realize we brought a beluga whale with us." Jack was busy rubbing sunscreen into the sand on his legs, but Alice heard every word loud and clear. At first, she thought she'd misheard, but when she looked at Catherine, there was that faint smirk, like it was a joke, but not really. "Sorry," Catherine quickly added. "I meant it as a joke. You're gorgeous, honey." But gorgeous couldn't undo the poison in whale. Alice's heart sank, and it wasn't the first time someone's words had made her feel so heavy. Later that day at lunch, Jack went to grab food from a nearby fish grill. He left the two of them at the table, where Alice sat quietly browsing the menu. Catherine flagged down the waiter with a smile and said, "She'll have a garden salad, no dressing." Alice opened her mouth to object, but Catherine looked at her calmly and said, "Trust me. It's better this way." She didn't order food with Alice. She ordered for her. And when the food came, Catherine pushed the plate toward her and said, "Eat clean. You'll thank me later." Jack came back and didn't notice a thing. "That all you're eating?" he asked. Alice nodded. Not very hungry. It was a lie, but not as big as the lie that she was okay. The next day at the hotel pool, Catherine asked Alice to take a few photos. "It's for memory, come on," she said. Alice hesitated, then agreed. But when the picture was taken and Catherine looked at her phone, she laughed loudly. "God, delete this. You look like you're pregnant with a dolphin." Jack was off at the cabana grabbing towels. Alice asked for the phone back and said quietly, "Can you not say things like that?" Catherine let out a long sigh and said, "Sweetheart, I'm just trying to help. You think boys at school go for girls who don't take care of themselves? I've been there. I know what works." Those words, "I'm just trying to help," echoed in Alice's ears like a weapon. Every insult, gift-wrapped as advice. She started eating less and less. At the hotel breakfast buffet, she only drank black coffee. Lunch was a fruit bowl. Dinner? She made excuses. Once, Jack asked, "You sure you're eating enough?" She said, "Yeah, I'm just trying something new." Jack smiled. "Healthy lifestyle, huh? Proud of you." She didn't smile. She didn't feel anything. Because part of her believed maybe he wanted to see what Catherine saw. A perfect, slim daughter. She didn't know who she was fighting anymore. Catherine, or the image now forming in her dad's eyes. And then, on the last day of the Miami trip, when they went to watch the sunset, Alice stayed behind. "I'm tired," she said, locking herself out on the hotel balcony. She watched through the glass as Jack and Catherine stood near the waves, setting up a tripod, laughing together. And that moment, her tears came soundlessly, because the hunger inside her, it wasn't just for food. It was for her father's love, for the validation that now seemed to come filtered through someone else's approval. She looked at herself in the mirror and asked her reflection, "Do I really look like what she says I do?" The only answer was silence. That Miami trip didn't burn her skin. It burned her self-worth. Even weeks after returning from Miami, Alice didn't feel like she was truly home. The slow whir of the ceiling fan, the folded newspaper on the dining table every morning, the faded quote on Dad's coffee mug that read, "Best girl, Dad." Everything looked the same, but something inside her had quietly broken. Each morning now began with her facing the mirror, just to see how much thinner her face had gotten. Her hair was starting to fall out, on her pillow, in the sink, caught in her brush. But what scared her more than anything was the emptiness she felt in her stomach. Not from hunger, but from the lack of human connection. She had distanced herself from food, not to punish herself, but because it made her feel in control. The less she ate, the more in charge she felt. Like Catherine's comments couldn't touch her if she had discipline. But it was only an illusion. At school, her teachers had started noticing. One day after math class, Miss Florence stopped her and asked, "You okay, sweetie?" "You look a little tired." Alice nodded the way she always did. "Just exams." At home, she locked herself in the bathroom and stood in front of the mirror, her ribs now visible. And still, Catherine's words echoed in her ears. "You'll thank me later." Jack hadn't really noticed. He was busy shopping for new furniture with Catherine, discussing nursery themes. She had recently hinted at a possible pregnancy. And Alice never complained. She never asked for help. But one day, everything cracked. It was a Monday. Alice came home from school and went straight to her room. Her face had gone pale, her lips dry, and the dark circles under her eyes had deepened. She tried brushing her hair, but when a clump came out in her hands, something inside her collapsed. She slid to the floor of the bathroom, burying her face in her palms. "Don't cry, don't be weak," she whispered to herself. But the tears didn't stop. When Jack got home, he did what he always did first. He walked toward Alice's room. He opened the door and saw his daughter sitting on the bed, trembling, silent, as if carrying something much too heavy for her shoulders. "Peanut?" he said softly. Alice looked up at him. Something in her eyes had broken. "Dad." Her voice was shaky. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart." "Do you think I look fat?" Jack froze. "What?" he asked, stunned. "Catherine said my metabolism wouldn't last. She called me a whale in Miami. She says I should fast. I tried." For a moment, Jack forgot how to breathe. "Catherine said what?" Alice didn't look at him. She just picked up a notebook. Her food journal. 10 days of entries, water, fruit, a few protein bars. She gestured toward the mirror. "Look at me, Dad. I thought if I'd just listened, maybe she'd like me. Maybe you'd still smile when you talked about her." Jack didn't know if what he felt was rage or guilt. He looked at his daughter, the same little girl who used to sit in his lap eating cookies, now battling her own body because someone told her she wasn't enough. Without a word, Jack lifted her, the way he did when she was too scared to get on the school bus for the first time. He carried her to the kitchen, opened the fridge, and pulled out her favorite Alfredo sauce. "Chicken Alfredo," he said, "with extra Parmesan, just the way you like it." Alice wiped her tears. "I'm not hungry." Jack smiled softly. "That's okay, but I'm still cooking it." because I need it. I need to feel like I'm doing something right. While cooking, Jack's face stayed still, but his eyes were wet. And then Alice said something, casually, like repeating an old memory. Catherine told me to stop eating carbs. She said if I wanted to look lovable, I had to starve a little. The spoon dropped from Jack's hand. He didn't say a word. He just turned toward Alice and quietly asked, "Since when?" "Since the backyard dinner," she replied. The very first day Catherine came over. That night, Jack hugged his daughter tightly for the first time in a long while. And when she tried to explain more, he just said, "I'm sorry, I should have seen it." He couldn't see Catherine's innocence anymore. Every smile, every compliment from her now felt laced with something calculated. And that night, Jack made a decision. That in the morning, he would confront her. But what he didn't know was that Catherine's next move would make everything far more complicated. The morning air felt normal. But inside Jack, a storm had already begun. He didn't drive straight home after dropping Alice at school. His first stop was a nearby coffee shop. A calm, public place where emotions couldn't spiral out of control. That's where he'd asked Catherine to meet him. She arrived looking polished, as always. Soft pastel shirt, hair neatly tied back, holding a takeaway coffee in one hand. "Morning," she said with a smile. "You look tense." Jack didn't return the smile. "Sit," he said plainly. Catherine sat down, the slight confusion on her face growing. Jack didn't waste time. "What have you been telling Alice?" Catherine's expression tightened, but her voice remained steady. "Excuse me?" "About her body, her weight. What exactly have you said to her?" There was a pause, that split second where people choose their defense. "Jack," she said gently, "I've just been trying to help. I mean, teen girls today, the pressure they're under, I was giving her guidance. By calling her a whale in Miami?" Now Jack's voice had changed, no longer calm. Catherine gave a soft, nervous laugh. "Oh, come on. It was a joke. She's sensitive." "Yeah," Jack shot back. "She is. Sensitive enough to starve herself for 10 days because you told her carbs make her unlovable." Catherine's face went cold. "Jeek," she exhaled sharply. "You're overreacting. She's trying to drive a wedge between us. She doesn't want me in your life, and now she's twisting everything." "Don't gaslight my daughter," Jack said firmly. He put down his coffee and stood. "I think we need space." Catherine gave a small nod and a tight smile. "Fine, take your space." She turned and walked away. And Jack thought, maybe that was the end. But it wasn't. That same evening, Jack's phone buzzed. A text, an attachment. "We need to talk. It's yours." Attached was a blurry black and white ultrasound image. A developing fetus. Jack's breath caught in his throat. He immediately called her. No answer. 15 minutes later, another text. "I'm not trying to trap you, but I think you deserve to know." That night, Jack didn't sleep. The next morning, he sent Alice off to school and sat with himself, tangled in guilt and confusion. Part of him wished it was a lie. But if it wasn't, then what? He was raised Catholic. Responsibility, fatherhood, duty, all deeply ingrained in him. And if the child really was his, but Alice, his daughter, her trust, her healing, he felt torn down the middle. That afternoon, he decided to meet Tara, one of Alice's mutual friends, someone he knew Catherine also had ties to. When Tara arrived at the same coffee shop, Jack gently slid the ultrasound image across the table. Her face changed instantly. "Is that?" "Catherine sent me this," Jack said. Tara leaned in, speaking carefully. "She did this before." Jack froze. "Excuse me?" 2 years ago. She told my cousin she was pregnant. Same story. Ultrasound, late-night calls, crying. even a fake baby bump. Said she miscarried at 12 weeks. But my cousin's sister found out she was ordering fake medical stuff online. No hospital record ever existed. A chill ran down Jack's spine. Why didn't you say something? I didn't know she was dating you, Tara said quietly. Not until Alice told me. Last week. Everything clicked. Jack rushed home. But by then, it was already too late. Catherine had somehow accessed his phone, under some innocent pretext. Jack couldn't even remember when. But that night, his phone reset itself. Everything was gone. Messages, call logs, gallery. Alice's chat history, her voice memos documenting her eating habits, all deleted. Jack's head spun. Catherine had sabotaged him, digitally. And now, he had no proof. He tried running data recovery on his laptop, but the files were scrambled beyond repair. The encryption was deliberate, intelligent, traced. And then, the next morning, Catherine was at the door again. Her mascara was slightly smudged. Her voice trembled with practiced guilt. I panicked, Jack. I just wanted to feel safe again. You made me feel like I wasn't wanted. She was a master actress. Every word fractured just enough to sound real. But now Jack heard a motive behind every syllable. He said nothing. But inside, he made another decision. He needed help. From someone he hadn't seen in years. But someone who once told him back in college, if you're ever caught in a mess that feels designed, you call me. His name was Brian. Before meeting Brian, Jack stood at a crossroads, one where every path seemed to lead him further away from himself. Catherine's pregnancy had seeped into every layer of his mind. For Jack, this wasn't just a question of truth or lie anymore. It had become a moral dilemma. If the child was his, could he really ignore that life? And if it wasn't, how would he ever prove it when all the evidence was gone? Every morning he woke up, drowning in doubt, guilt tightening around his chest as he looked at Alice, and suspicion creeping in when he looked into Catherine's eyes. Catherine had grown more careful, every word now wrapped in sympathy. Jack, she said one evening, her voice soft, I know Alice hates me, and I don't blame her, but I don't want to bring this baby into a hostile environment. Jack stayed silent. I don't want Alice to feel like she has to earn her place, so I was thinking I'd go stay with my sister for a few days, just until things settle down. The line was delivered gently, just slow enough to seep guilt into his bones. But then she added, almost too casually, or maybe Alice should go stay somewhere, just until we figure out what's best for the baby. Jack didn't respond, but something in his soul flinched. Would he really send his daughter away, just to protect the illusion one woman was weaving around a lie? Catherine had started building a web of emotional guilt. She printed ultrasound images, showed him nursery paint samples, pulled out baby clothes her mother had once saved just in case. Just imagine, Jack, she'd say with a smile. A tiny version of you, running around this house. Jack was unraveling, torn between a daughter who had gone quiet and frail, and a woman who wrapped every wave of nausea and every morning tear with the ribbon of "This is our future." That night, Alice didn't eat dinner. She just sat at the table, blankly staring at an empty plate. You not hungry? Jack asked. She shook her head. Catherine chimed in quickly. Teen girls. Hormones. I've read it's common. For the first time, Jack slammed his fist on the table. Enough. Catherine went silent. But in her eyes, he caught it. A flicker of fear. The next morning, Jack called his sister, Eleanor. Elle, can Alice stay with you for a few days? There was a long pause on the other end. Is she okay? She's fine, Jack lied. Things at home are just complicated. I think she needs space. For her own good. Eleanor didn't sugarcoat her response. You mean Catherine needs more space? Her words echoed in Jack's chest. Jack, she's your daughter, not a guest, not a problem you send away. If she's hurting, you don't push her out. You pull her closer. That night, Alice locked her bedroom door. For the first time ever. Jack stood outside and asked, Can we talk? No answer. A few minutes later, he noticed a sticky note slid under the door, taped from the inside. Don't pick a maybe baby over your real one. Jack's eyes filled with tears. That night, he sat on the living room sofa, staring into nothing. He remembered the day Alice was 5, when she had a nightmare and climbed into his lap, sobbing. She had whispered, If I disappear, how will you find me? And Jack had promised, I'll never let you disappear, even if you're invisible. I'll still feel you. Now, his daughter was disappearing, and he couldn't even see it happening. That night, his fingers trembled as he texted a number he hadn't used in years. I need you. It's urgent. It's about Catherine. He sent it to one person. Brian. Brian Wilkins, Jack's college roommate and a semi-retired forensic investigator, was the kind of man who turns into a myth in small towns. His hair was now fully gray, but his stride still held that same firmness, and his eyes. They had that sharpness that could read lies like ink burning through paper. Jack and Brian hadn't properly spoken in years. Life, work, and distance had slowly turned friendship into memory. But that evening, when Jack walked into his small workshop, now a cyber forensics and data recovery space, Brian opened the door and simply said, Tell me everything. No filters. Jack started talking, but the words fell from his mouth like stones. He told him about Alice's condition, Catherine's behavior, the ultrasound photo, and the phone's data wipe. All of it. Brian listened silently. Then he took Jack's phone and said, First off, whoever wiped this did it professionally. Either she used a secondary device or a planted app. Was your phone ever in her hands alone? Jack nodded. Once. She said her phone died, needed to check email. Brian exhaled slowly. Yeah, classic entry point. She probably uploaded a background process that mirrored and wiped target data. Can you recover it? Jack's voice held a thread of hope. Maybe, but it'll take a few days. Meanwhile, we do it the old-fashioned way. And that's when it began. A conspiracy, a calculated, quiet retaliation that would turn every one of Catherine's moves into a trap she built for herself. Brian first called Alice. He didn't do anything without her consent. Alice was nervous, but when she saw that Brian listened without judgment, her eyes filled with a bit of trust. Tell me, Brian said. What's the worst thing she ever did when your dad wasn't looking? Alice said, She told me my thighs were settling, like furniture. She laughed when I stopped eating bread. And once, she took a photo of me in my swimsuit and sent it to her sister. I saw the message. It said, Needs major work before prom. Brian nodded. That's not advice. That's psychological warfare. The three of them spent the next 2 days building a detailed plan. Brian dug through Catherine's digital footprint. And there it was. Her old Etsy account, once used to sell fake pregnancy accessories. Then came her Amazon orders, a prosthetic pregnancy bump, gelatin padding, and even adhesive patches. Gotcha, Brian smirked. Then Brian came up with a plan to trap Catherine inside her own web of lies at her pre-baby celebration party. Jack hadn't approved the party yet, but Catherine had left him a voice message. It'll be small, just close friends, for the baby. I think we need it. Brian said, Approve it. We need a stage for her to collapse on. At first, Jack thought it was a bit too theatrical. But when he looked at Alice, her exhausted face, yet eyes holding a spark for the first time, he agreed. Alice reached out to her cousin Maya, the one who overshared everything. And Catherine's weak spot? It was Maya. The plan was simple. During the party, Maya would tamper with Catherine's timeline. When Catherine said she was 3 months pregnant, Maya would innocently say, "Wait, you got pregnant in March, right? But you met Jack in April." That's where the confusion would begin. And Brian said, "Her own lie will eat her alive." Jack finally approved the party. And Catherine, maybe out of guilt, maybe out of fear, began rushing everything. Catherine went silent. But in her eyes, he caught it. A flicker of fear. The next morning, Jack called his sister, Eleanor. "Elle, can Alice stay with you for a few days?" There was a long pause on the other end. "Is she okay?" "She's fine," Jack lied. "Things at home are just complicated. I think she needs space, for her own good." Eleanor didn't sugarcoat her response. "You mean Catherine needs more space?" Her words echoed in Jack's chest. "Jack, she's your daughter, not a guest, not a problem you send away. If she's hurting, you don't push her out. You pull her closer." That night, Alice locked her bedroom door, for the first time ever. Jack stood outside and asked, "Can we talk?" No answer. A few minutes later, he noticed a sticky note slid under the door, taped from the inside. "Don't pick a maybe baby over your real one." Jack's eyes filled with tears. That night, he sat on the living room sofa, staring into nothing. He remembered the day Alice was 5, when she had a nightmare and climbed into his lap, sobbing. She had whispered, "If I disappear, how will you find me?" And Jack had promised, "I'll never let you disappear. Even if you're invisible, I'll still feel you." Now, his daughter was disappearing, and he couldn't even see it happening. That night, his fingers trembled as he texted a number he hadn't used in years. "I need you. It's urgent. It's about Catherine." He sent it to one person. Brian. Brian Wilkins, Jack's college roommate and a semi-retired forensic investigator, was the kind of man who turns into a myth in small towns. His hair was now fully gray, but his stride still held that same firmness, and his eyes, they had that sharpness that could read lies like ink burning through paper. Jack and Brian hadn't properly spoken in years. Life, work, and distance had slowly turned friendship into memory. But that evening, when Jack walked into his small workshop, now a cyber forensics and data recovery space, Brian opened the door and simply said, "Tell me everything. No filters." Jack started talking, but the words fell from his mouth like stones. He told him about Alice's condition, Catherine's behavior, the ultrasound photo, and the phone's data wipe. All of it. Brian listened silently. Then he took Jack's phone and said, "First off, whoever wiped this did it professionally. Either she used a secondary device or a planted app. Was your phone ever in her hands alone?" Jack nodded. "Once. She said her phone died, needed to check email." Brian exhaled slowly. "Yeah, classic entry point. She probably uploaded a background process that mirrored and wiped target data. Can you recover it?" Jack's voice held a thread of hope. "Maybe, but it'll take a few days. Meanwhile, we do it the old-fashioned way." And that's when it began. A conspiracy, a calculated, quiet retaliation that would turn every one of Catherine's moves into a trap she built for herself. Brian first called Alice. He didn't do anything without her consent. Alice was nervous, but when she saw that Brian listened without judgment, her eyes filled with a bit of trust. "Tell me," Brian said, "what's the worst thing she ever did when your dad wasn't looking?" Alice said, "She told me my thighs were settling, like furniture." She laughed when I stopped eating bread. And once, she took a photo of me in my swimsuit and sent it to her sister. I saw the message. It said, "Needs major work before prom." Brian nodded. "That's not advice. That's psychological warfare. The three of them spent the next 2 days building a detailed plan. Brian dug through Catherine's digital footprint, and there it was, her old Etsy account, once used to sell fake pregnancy accessories. Then came her Amazon orders. A prosthetic pregnancy bump, gelatin padding, and even adhesive patches. Gotcha, Brian smirked. Then Brian came up with a plan to trap Catherine inside her own web of lies at her pre-baby celebration party. Jack hadn't approved the party yet, but Catherine had left him a voice message. It'll be small, just close friends. For the baby. I think we need it. Brian said, approve it. We need a stage for her to collapse on. At first, Jack thought it was a bit too theatrical. But when he looked at Alice, her exhausted face, yet eyes holding a spark for the first time, he agreed. Alice reached out to her cousin Maya, the one who overshared everything. And Catherine's weak spot? It was Maya. The plan was simple. During the party, Maya would tamper with Catherine's timeline. When Catherine said she was 3 months pregnant, Maya would innocently say, "Wait, you got pregnant in March, right? But you met Jack in April." That's where the confusion would begin, and Brian said, "Her own lie will eat her alive." Jack finally approved the party, and Catherine, maybe out of guilt, maybe out of fear, began rushing everything. Nursery decor, baby gifts wish list, even printed invitations. On the day of the party, Alice wore an old silver chain that had once belonged to her mother, the one Jack had gifted her when she was in middle school. That chain became her shield. Brian was there too, disguised as a family friend, wearing camera glasses. Everything was going to be documented. Every word, every moment, every lie. Before the party began, Jack held Alice's hand and said, "I should have believed you sooner." Alice smiled and said, "Believe me now." And that night, when the entire house was glowing in celebration, drowning in Catherine's joy, no one had any idea that in just a few minutes, all those smiles would turn to dust. Because of one question from the girl who had endured everything in silence. The house was decorated with pink and soft yellow balloons. The lighting was dim, and soft jazz played in the background. An atmosphere designed to feel like hope and motherhood. Catherine wore a white chiffon dress with a slightly rounded belly bump that drew coos of "so cute" from everyone who saw her. Jack was unusually calm that evening, almost beyond calm. Like a storm was locked inside, but his face still wore the smile of a gracious host. Alice stood at a distance, next to her cousin Maya. She wore that same silver chain and light makeup, but there was something different in her eyes. She wasn't scared. She wasn't sad. She was ready. Brian stood in one corner of the room. His camera glasses were active, and his phone was discreetly synced to the one in Jack's pocket. The entire atmosphere had become a carefully staged trap. A stage for justice against a lie. Everything at the party appeared normal. Champagne glasses, baby name suggestion cards, and a photo booth where friends posed with funny captions. Catherine hugged everyone warmly. When she saw Alice, she gave a soft smile and simply said, "Glad you came." Alice nodded. No words, no expression. Then, as the guests began to relax and the Guess the Baby Due Date game started, Jack picked up the mic and said, "Before we cut the cake, just a quick thanks. To all of you for showing up, and especially to this brave woman standing beside me." Catherine smiled and held onto Jack's arm. "Also," Jack continued, "I'd like to thank someone else. My daughter." Alice stepped forward gently. She didn't look at the cameras. She looked straight into Catherine's eyes. She turned to Maya and asked, "Didn't you say Catherine told you she got pregnant in March?" Maya, who spoke on impulse by nature, immediately replied, "Yeah, she told me in April. She said it happened mid-March, like right around St. Patrick's Day. Jack turned to the crowd and said, "Interesting, because I didn't meet Catherine until April 5th. For a second, the whole room fell silent. Color began to drain from Catherine's face. She laughed nervously. "Wait, that can't be right. I mean, we met earlier, maybe? Online?" "From the back," Brian said casually. "No online activity before April 3rd. I checked now. All eyes turned to Catherine. Jack took a step forward and asked, "Would you like to explain the pregnancy timeline, Catherine?" She stood still for a few seconds, eyes wide, unblinking, as if something inside her had snapped. Then suddenly she turned toward the cake, and with full force, threw the chocolate-layered cake across the room. The cake splattered against the wall and hit the floor. "You all think you're so smart," she screamed. "You think you can corner me after everything I've done?" Silence. Her eyes were now red with tears and rage. "Fine," she shouted. "There is no baby. Happy now?" Everyone in the room turned into stone. No one moved. No one spoke. Brian quietly turned off his camera. His job was done. Alice spoke softly. "You said I needed to starve to be lovable. You made me invisible in my own home." Catherine now spun into full hysteria. "He chose me. You were just a spoiled little brat who couldn't handle competition." Jack's voice was ice. "Catherine, get out." "Jack, please. If you ever contact me or my daughter again, I'll press charges for harassment, identity fraud, and data sabotage. You're done here." Catherine tried to say something else, but no one was listening. Eleanor and Brian didn't move aside from the doorway. Finally, she left without taking anything. The same dress in which she'd tried to play the role of a mother now hung on her like a curtain of helplessness. As the door shut behind her, the room exhaled together, like a dark storm had passed and the air had finally gone still. Jack looked at Alice. She smiled for the first time in days. Her eyes were wet. He walked up to her and said, "I'm so proud of you." Alice looked back at him and said, "I never wanted to be right. I just wanted you to see." "Now I do," Jack replied. That night wasn't just the unmasking of a liar. It was the redefinition of a father and daughter's bond. The night after the party, the house held a deep silence. Not of fear or regret, but of the emptiness that lingers in the rubble after a storm. But from rubble, new bricks are made. And that morning, for the first time, Jack and Alice looked at each other with nothing left between them. No shame, no masks, no distance. Catherine was served a restraining order that same week. Her digital footprints, traced by Brian, were handed over to local police, along with a full report of fraudulent identity, psychological manipulation, and data tampering. But for Alice, real justice didn't come from the law. It came from her father's eyes, because for the first time, they saw her clearly. No guilt, no confusion, just truth. 3 days later, after coming home from school, Alice noticed something different. A subtle warmth in the air, a scent drifting from the kitchen, vanilla and cinnamon. On the dining table sat a small card. "Kitchen. Bring your appetite. No salad." She smiled. When she stepped into the kitchen, Jack was sitting at the counter. 2 ceramic bowls in front of him, each filled with double scoop ice cream. 1 cookie dough, 1 mint chocolate chip. "Your top 2, he said. "Because when words fail, ice cream speaks." Alice laughed, but her eyes welled up. "Dad, you don't have to do this." "Actually," Jack replied, "I do. Because I didn't protect you when I should have. I mistook cruelty for compatibility, and I thought being a good partner meant being a bad father." Alice said softly, "You weren't bad. You were just blind." "Fair," Jack nodded. "But now I see." They sat together, No grand moment, no dramatic closure. Just two people rebuilding one spoonful at a time. That night, while watching an old episode of The Vampire Diaries together on the couch, Jack handed Alice a small velvet box. Inside was a silver necklace with two interlocking circles. Two pieces, always connected, he said. You and me, against the world. Alice put it on, and for the first time in weeks, felt light, like she'd found her place again. In the weeks that followed, things slowly began to heal. Jack started therapy, for himself and for joint sessions with Alice. He came home on time every night, and their conversations shifted, from nursery decor to painting lessons. Alice began to eat again, not just food, but without guilt. She gave herself permission to enjoy what she'd once feared. Her grades began to climb. Her hair started filling back in. But more than anything, her walk changed. She no longer moved like a survivor. She moved like a girl who had stared down a monster, named it, fought it, and won. One evening, Jack asked, "You think we'll ever forget her?" Alice replied, "I hope not, because what she did, it didn't break me, and what doesn't break us, shapes us." She said it, and Jack just nodded. The truth was, this wasn't a story about betrayal or revenge. It was a story about repair, about a daughter who found her voice, and a father who finally learned how to listen. Friends, if you liked the video and the story, then please like the video and tell us in the comment how you liked the story.